Going to be releasing the JFK files.
There is a reason that this has not been released for over 60 years.
It has to be because the CIA is involved.
There was government involvement, and I don't think a country wants to reveal that, even if it's 60 years later.
Trump saying that they're going to release 80,000 documents or the JFK files. You interviewed a guy who has been studying this for decades.
Yeah, Jefferson Morley.
So what are your thoughts about? I know you're skeptical, but Trump did say 80,000. He said 80,000 documents unredacted.
I won't get into politics, but Trump says a lot of things. So he could very well release 80,000 documents. The question is, how much of the documents is already stuff that other researchers and other reporters have already kind of dug up and is already public information, like, you know, the big Epstein file drop from a few weeks ago that everybody was pissed off about because it was all stuff that was already out there. So there could be new stuff that is interesting, but is not like the smoking gun kind of stuff. And if you've looked into the JFK assassination, I'm by no means a scholar, but I've read a few books and documentaries. You know, the real smoking gun that people want to know is the files on Lee Harvey Oswald and his relationship and possible employment with the CIA and the FBI. If Trump releases that stuff, I will be the first one to credit him. But I don't know what documents he's releasing. So that, you know, assuming he releases new stuff that has never been out there, then, you know, experts like Jefferson Morley of JFK files, you know, should be able to start digging in right away. Oliver Stone, who's done documentaries and research on this. But there is, I mean, recently it came out that the FBI had found, I believe it was 1,400 or 14,000 documents that were kind of mislabeled or misfiled somewhere. So there's a lot of different documents. They've been held in different places. So I am skeptical, but, you know, we'll just have to see what he releases. To be clear, you know, there is a reason that this has not been released for over 60 years. Many, many different presidents. So, you know, I think most common sense people do not believe the official story. And the CIA and FBI it's kind of generational secrecy. So even though most of the people that might have been involved in a potential CIA assassination of the president, even though a lot of them are dead now, most of them are dead now, that doesn't mean the current agency, you know, would just freely say to the president, all right, release it. So I'll be curious to see what is released, if it's a lot of stuff that's already public knowledge, if some new stuff is sprinkled in, but not exactly smoking gun information. We'll see.
I believe the official explanation. What am I trying to say? Explanation. Explanation. I believed it until like the last maybe year, 6 months to a year. I really did. Like I kind of was like, oh, you know, listen, I saw Oliver Stone, I saw JFK, and I've watched a bunch of these shows where they talk about the rifle and, you know, the scope was broken. And, and of course I'm always like, okay, well, the scope could have been broken. It could have been working. He dropped it. It got jammed, like whatever. You know, I believed all of these things, and I've seen the Zapruder film, and I've been like, okay, well, bullets travel in very odd ways. You know what I'm saying? They travel differently, bounce, and that film's not clear enough. And I always kind of believed it. But I'm telling you, Jordan, in the last 6 months to a year, there have been so many things that I absolutely was sure of the official explanation that have just not been true. You know what I'm saying? It's like mocking people when you were when I was in the 80s and 90s, or you'd mock people for believing in UFOs. And now the Navy comes out and they got all these fucking videos, and you got all these pilots, and not only that, then pilots of commercial jets are coming out saying, well, yeah, we see stuff, like there's all of these things. And it's like all of the things that I was 100% positive people were just these nutty conspiracy theory people are now correct. Maybe they're not 100% correct, but then they don't have 100% of the information either. So they're putting it together with what they can figure out because they don't have the official records. And the thing with JFK is I just don't understand why you wouldn't release it, why they wouldn't have released it earlier. And there's so many different versions and so many different things that are coming out from people digging stuff up on their own that it just the official record just, or explanation. Wow, I'm having a hard time. It just can't be right. And so I'm dying to know what's in these fucking things. I mean, I'm dying to know. Like, there's just no, like now everything I look at, I don't believe anything that comes out anymore. And I keep thinking too, like you said, all these people are dead. Like all these people are dead. Like, why wouldn't you release it? That it has to be because the CIA is involved, or because I had a guy on the other day who was saying he believes that somehow or another, he believed it was, he had a whole theory in and of, on his own that I'd never heard. And it basically was all kind of a conspiracy, and almost everybody involved was Jewish, and that the Mossad was involved. And there was a whole thing there that he had. And he was like, and due to anti-Semitism, they were afraid to ever mention it because it wouldn't look good for Israel for some reason. And he had a whole theory on that. And I can't regurgitate everything that he said because it was a little bit more complicated than my brain is able to comprehend. But of course, whenever these guys say it, it makes sense. And I was like, God, that's pretty good too. That's a good one. I've had a couple of guys on here who have talked about JFK and, Cuba and the mob, and how, and they'll track Oswald's trek to Cuba and back and here and back. And it basically almost seems like they just like Oliver Stone, they placed him in the depository and then they shot him and they planted it on Oswald. Could you imagine Oswald if he really, I'm just going to work, bro. I got me this job at the Texas Depository, book depository. Like, he's just figured it out as it's happening. That poor guy, if it's true.
Well, I think when I first started doubting it, I believe it was 60 Minutes of all places, or some show like that decades ago. They recruited like 10 or so of the world's most renowned marksmen to duplicate that shot from the 6th floor. By the way, through a tree or over a tree, because there was a tree there. And most of them couldn't do it. And if they could, it was like on, many, many, many tries. Lee Harvey Oswald was not some expert marksman. Then you have the Zapruder film. I mean, if you watch it, it seems very clear to me that JFK is moving backwards.
Yeah.
I'm not a ballistics expert. I don't know how a bullet from behind you is thrusting you backwards. Then you have very, very clear, I think, some type of corruption where...
From Joe Rogan to Gary Brecka, the term spike protein and conversations around detoxing have become a common topic lately, with many suffering from increased spike protein production, either from long COVID or a side effect from the vaccine. There's now a proven, all-natural solution formulated by Dr. Peter McCullough in collaboration with the Wellness Company, and they just leveled up their original detox formula for $30 less. Introducing the 3-in-1 Ultra Spike Detox, conveniently consolidated into one capsule, with 4 times more nattokinase and enzyme researched for its anti-clotting effects, may work to break down spike proteins. Combined with bromelain and curcumin, it provides a potent blend of detoxification and cellular support. Crafted with 100% natural ingredients, Ultimate Spike Detox is backed by research and offers effective support for your cell's natural repair and recovery. Experience the only formula approved and used by Dr. Peter McCullough, the most published cardiologist in the world. Head to twc.health/Cox and use promo code COX to get 10% off. Again, that's twc.health/Cox and use promo code COX to get 10% off and get back to that pre-COVID feeling.
They're refusing to allow an autopsy at the Dallas hospital.
Right.
And they, mandate that it has to be done in Bethesda. You have military interference and generals interfering with the autopsy at the naval facility in Bethesda. There's accounts that, part of his brain was shot off and then put back in. And then a more recent Oliver Stone documentary, which was very thorough. I mean, some kind of people who poo-poo on this criticize Oliver Stone, but in my experience watching his documentaries, it seems he's got receipts for a lot of things he's putting in there. His most recent one, I think it was JFK Revisited or something like that. I mean, there were witnesses on the ground, on the grassy knoll, that were telling local media they saw a second shooter, but the media wouldn't show that footage or wouldn't show those interviews. You had witnesses in the book depository that worked there saying when they ran down the stairs right after the shots, they didn't see Lee Harvey Oswald running down the stairs. He would have been on the 6th floor. They were below him, but running down at the same time. So there's many things, like Lee Harvey Oswald ordered a gun that was a totally different gun. So when you add all these things, and I'm probably just naming a few, and then just my spidey sense as a journalist, I mean, JFK's, it's not a secret, he was not exactly a faithful man. He had a mistress, Mary Meyer, who a year, just very quickly after his assassination, started asking questions and had talked to Bobby Kennedy that they thought there might be something more nefarious. She's mysteriously killed less than a year later. There's a whole book on it. She's mysteriously killed, like, in the broad daylight in Georgetown, jogging, because she was starting to kind of bark up the wrong tree and speak out publicly that she didn't believe the official story. So there's just so many things. But overall, you just, if everything is created equally, they literally have broken the law. The 1992 JFK Records Release Act said that they were supposed to release all this many years ago, and Congress and presidents have just said, screw it. So I can't think of another reason why you wouldn't release it if there's stuff in there that shows, even if if it's not a full-blown CIA conspiracy, that there was government involvement, even in a minimal way. And I don't think a country wants to reveal that, even if it's 60 years later, because just think about the cascading ramifications. Then you also have the Warren Commission. I mean, that's a whole nother story. They had the guy that JFK fired, Alan Dulles, running the Warren Commission, witnesses who testified against the official story. Their testimony was not included. So there's so many different things. And there's people who could speak about this, like Jefferson Morley, JFK files, much better than I. But when you pair all these things together, it doesn't make sense that 60 years later, we're still waiting for, tens of thousands of documents if there's not something to conceal.
So what do you think the ramifications are that it gets released and you find out? One, I can't believe that you would even keep these documents. So let's assume that there really are documents, because I would imagine that, let's say, LBJ was involved and ordered the Secret Service, or sorry, not Secret Service, ordered the CIA to have this guy to set this whole thing up, find a fall guy, get us 2 or 3 shooters that can kill him. Also, the route was changed at the last minute. Like, these guys come and say, this is the best route. This would be the best, perfect hairpin turn. He has to slow down to less than 15 miles an hour. He'd be in the perfect position for us to pop him. There are places we can place guys easily where we can shoot it. It's a perfect place to take him out. And we've got this guy in the Texas Depository. He's been working there a few months. It's perfect, but they have to change the route. They change it at the last minute. So if it were to come out, hey, that LBJ ordered it, which is what I kind of think happened. He orders it. They change the route. The CIA gets a bunch of marksmen that are either in the military or former military, because I saw an interview with a guy who was locked up in prison that insists he was one of the shooters. And I think he had been in the military and was now doing private contracting. I could be wrong about that, but somehow or another, he was former military, a former sniper, but he was now doing like private security. And they came to him one day and said, "This is what we want you to do." Pretty sure that's how it worked. And they went, and he was basically like the guy in the grassy knoll or something, or he was in the where was he? It was a train tracks or something he was near. Anyway, he explains the whole thing. I mean, he's got a whole thing about biting the bullet, where he's like placed it. There was teeth marks on a bullet that they had found, and that there were teeth marks in it. And he's saying those were his teeth marks. Anyway, point is that let's assume that the CIA set the whole thing up and they have JFK killed. So what do you think the ramifications is if all of these guys are now dead? Is your fear that they dismantle the CIA when nobody that was a part of this is still alive? Or you think that they come up with a whole new slew of oversight that the CIA doesn't want? Like, what exactly are the ramifications?
I forgot one thing, by the way. It came out that there was a thwarted assassination attempt of JFK like 2 or 3 weeks earlier in Chicago, where JFK was scheduled to fly to Chicago, but the Secret Service called wind that there was 2 shooters in a hotel over the route that JFK was going to be going through, and they called it off. So could, believed to be maybe they were pre-Oswald patsies. But so there's a lot of things. There's a lot of different ramifications. Obviously not like, oh, you're going to exhume the bodies and try them. I mean, whoever was involved is gone. So no ramifications for people who were complicit. But I think it's kind of tied into the last half century. I mean, Dwight Eisenhower warned of the military-industrial complex, which is absolutely on steroids now. Our military budget is closing in on $1 trillion. It probably is $1 trillion because the CIA is not added into the Pentagon budget. And if it is shown that the CIA was involved essentially in a coup of the U.S. government, for modern day people, they would be aghast, but you might say, okay, but what's that going to do? Most people weren't alive during that time, definitely not the younger generation. But I think, how do people trust anything really coming from the government modern day if this happened then? And it seems that there was a cover up after the cover up, because they've hid it from the masses for 60 years. And if Trump actually releases it, he would deserve credit. But people would say, hey, Biden, Obama, Bush, Clinton, Reagan, all of these people were in on it. And this cover up, then you start asking questions. We have 1,000 military bases around the world. We're bombing, 8 or 9 countries at once, all in the name of national defense or spreading democracy. I think it would have ramifications because people would, there's obviously a large number of people in America on both sides that already don't believe, are anti-war or don't believe in, the stated goal of the CIA, the FBI. But I really think it would have major ramifications for trust in government. I think there would be more critical protest, possibly people running on a policy to dismantle the CIA, dismantle the FBI. Let's take that money and, give it to whatever people, food for poor kids or, college or et cetera. So I think it really could, people already, not just like conspiracy theorists, but just normies already don't trust a lot of what's coming out from the government, whether it's about health, war. We're giving all these countries money. So I think the main thing would be like, a lot of people might say, hey, we can't trust this government because the government then 60 years ago killed the president, and every government since helped conceal it.
Yeah, I hear you. That's
not to mention why. Everybody's got theories, but it is fact. JFK in his final year was trying to get out of Vietnam, was trying to normalize relations with the boogeyman, Cuba and the Soviet Union. He did the infamous American University speech, which really pissed off all the warmongers and the generals because he talked about, peace. And we need peace. The Soviet Union and their children there are just like our children. But it was really, he signed, I believe it was a couple months before he was assassinated, to initiate removing 1,000 troops from Vietnam. So that goes to, it's not only that they killed the president, but why? And why was it concealed? Which goes to this whole military-industrial complex. So I really think, a big major reason for why we have such gross income inequality, and a lot of people think we live in a new Gilded Age where money is concentrated to the top, is the military industrial complex. I mean, so much of our manufacturing, so much of our industry is built on war and building whatever planes and drones and new and modern technology. But if this is exposed that he was killed in large part to scale all that back. I mean, JFK infamously said, I want to, obliterate the CIA into little smithereens. I really think it could totally change the dynamic in terms of what the American people demand from their government. I could be totally naive too. And also, I mean, you could also have potentially more violence against politicians or people, because the people who are part of this system aren't going to let it go quietly.
I mean, listen, between that and the Luigi thing, you know what I'm saying? Like it's happening. You know what I mean? Like I think that you get to a point where people say, I can't trust the government or I can't trust the system, and I'm just gonna. You get people that start taking the taking the law into their own hands. Right? Like
we saw assassination attempts against Trump. It's rumored that there was some close calls that didn't really go public with Obama that were thwarted. There are wanted signs that have been out there for other CEOs after the killing of killing of the United Healthcare CEO. So, and I'm seeing it. I mean, I go on the ground. I cover politics. I cover labor, worker strikes, just worker exploitation, homeless. I cover a lot of different things, and it's kind of a left-right thing. We've had really a controlled demolition of the working class. Whole cities and towns, particularly in the Midwest and other parts of the country, they look like ghost towns because the plants are closed and there's So people, you could only, JFK said it, when you make peaceful resistance impossible, violent revolution is inevitable. He said that. So I do think a lot of these things, obviously with different stories, but the Luigi thing and this, there's an interconnectivity where people are working harder, longer hours, more jobs, and they're getting less. Productivity has gone up over the last 30 years. Wages have stayed about the same. They say based on inflation, the minimum wage should be closer to like $25, $26. The federal minimum wage is like $7.25. And now with AI, you could say AI is good for many things, but like any technology, it could be abused. And a lot of these corporations and CEOs are just chomping at the bit to use AI to replace workers. So I do think we're at a boiling point, and that's part of why even something from 60 years ago, if it is shown not only that the government was in on it, but every government since then basically hit it, who the hell knows what will happen?
Well, the middle class has clearly shrunk and shrunk and shrunk, and there are more rich now than there ever really have been. The poor is massive. That the disparity between the haves and the have-nots is huge, and growing all the time. So yeah, and inflation, let's face it, who's it hurt? It doesn't hurt the rich.
No.
So it hurts the middle, the middle class that is left. It hurts them, but it really hurts the poor too. oh man, you had said so many things. You were going on it, and I was like, oh, I got to mention this. I can't remember now. But I'm very curious to know I'm super curious to know what's going to happen. And I mean, I got to know what these documents are going to say. How long does it take to go through these documents? And, and I am, it's funny, like what's funny is people are tearing apart the Luigi case, right? Like you just said, they found all of these posts. They found all these, Reddit and subreddit and all the different stuff that you were talking about. What's all of these different social media things and the manifesto and all these things, and yet the kid that tried to kill Trump has almost been completely scrubbed. There's almost nothing on him,
right?
And I don't. It's funny because I've mentioned this to a couple of guys. Oh, and as far as the CEOs are terrified. I know that because I have a friend who is retired FBI, another one who is a former CIA agent, and they have a security company. And he said, I talked to him this morning. I have another retired FBI agent friend that is a private investigator in Florida. This is another guy. So anyway, this guy said, business is booming, and their specialty is they don't even provide, I don't think they provide security. What they do is they look at your security and they determine where it's weak. And then of course they'll arrange for security for you need to get this, you need to do this. Here's the thing. So they find the holes in your security and what you need to be doing different to be safe. And he said, we are booked. So people are, CEOs are definitely concerned. I'd be concerned.
I think there's
making questionable decisions.
I think there's also another component to why they have concealed this for so long, beyond just the actual smoking gun that might show CIA, FBI too, but complicity. But there's a lot of documents that could expose, quote, sources and methods. And that's what's always used by the CIA, FBI for why something's classified. We can't release this document because it will reveal sources and methods that we use for national defense, i.e., spies' identities or mechanisms we use or techniques we use to infiltrate other countries or yada, yada, yada. But there's a lot of sources and methods that the United States CIA, FBI have used that are pretty unethical, probably illegal if you look at international law. Hell, they tried to poison Fidel Castro, I think, something on his jacket.
Over and over again.
Yeah. The United States, for all its moral preening and lecturing about other countries, we've done and do some terrible, terrible shit around the world. So there could be things in those documents that expose, things that we tried to do to Russia or Cuba or coups we attempted in other countries, or techniques we're still using. We have done disinformation campaigns in other countries. We've infiltrated, spies to, sow discourse. We've unleashed people to commit violent acts in other countries and then pin it on an opposition group we don't like. So America's done some awful stuff, and my strong guess is there's stuff in those documents that might expose some of those sources and methods, and that's the real reason those things have been classified. That's Jefferson Morley at JFK Files has talked extensively about this, so have other JFK scholars. The classification system in America is widely abused, and many, many things should not be classified. They're not classified for national defense. They're classified for, protecting our ass.
Yeah. So two things. One is if it specifically had to do, if those documents specifically had to do with the JFK assassination, and it's clearly said that, that LBJ, talked to so-and-so and he contacted the CIA and they contacted the military and they arranged for him to be killed. And let's say it lays out exactly like that. If it laid out exactly like that, I would think that those documents just don't exist. You just have to go through full-time job. Your full-time job for the next 5 years is to find every single document that might place any of these people in that chain of custody that ended up with this guy dead in any way. And they just spend the next 5 years erasing, let's say LBJ, the next his full term. Your full-time job, bro, is just going through these files and erasing them. So that's one thing. So I don't really know that those, I'd love to think that they did exist. I just think that nobody would be dumb enough to leave those documents circulating. Anyway, that's one thing. The other thing is the classification thing. It's funny. I was talking to a guy about Epstein the other day, and he said, and he's this guy wrote a book like several years ago about Epstein, and the list, the client list, which there's no real list, but he was talking about how he's after. Is it Maxine? I forget her last name. Or Maxwell.
Ghislaine Maxwell.
Thank you, Ghislaine Maxwell. That he was talking about how he said after her case, like the FBI or whoever it was came out and said, the case is closed. We won't be prosecuting anyone else. It's done, closed. He said, I then ordered a Freedom of Information Act. And he said 6 months later, I got something back saying, we can't give you any of the files because the case is ongoing. It's still open. He's like, the FBI director just said, he's like named all these people who said, case is closed, no more prosecutions, we're done. He's like, so, he's like I waited 6 more months thinking maybe they're wrapping it up, did another one, took another 6 months. He said, got it back again. Boom. Sorry, it's still open. We can't give you any information. Like, come on, man. Like, or the other, I love the other one is it has to do with national. Oh, then the other one, he said it's been denied. His Freedom of Information Act was denied or certain documents were denied because of national security reasons.
Right.
What national security reasons are there to deny me access to a guy who's like, if you're saying that's national security, then there's a bigger problem here than some rich guy that likes young girls.
The politicians involved with him. That's the national security.
Right. But they don't release anything national security. So yeah, people just don't ask questions and people just shrug it off and they don't look into it and they don't push it, to the point where people have to answer questions.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing also about this. I mean, I guess there's really no way to know. I mean, if every single document is released, then the next question is, how do we know this is all the documents? What was destroyed? Were there things destroyed? Because the people who probably destroyed them are dead. So I don't know how solid the chain of custody has been here, because if you think about it, if there's actually a document that has Lyndon B. Johnson in writing or something incriminating, I don't think it's too far-fetched to think certain people would have gotten rid of that document.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. There's some guy out there who's gone through and just, what did Stalin call it when they would redact? They remove someone. Remember, he'd be upset with somebody. He'd have them executed, and then he'd go and it was like a purge. They'd go through and they'd actually find any official photographs or anything and scratch the person's face out, or they'd eliminate their names from the guy never existed. He'd been purged from the records. So, yeah, we'll see. I'd love to believe that we're going to get to see some stuff. You know what's going to be horrible is that if this does come out, it'll just destroy the next few weeks of YouTube for me. It'll be great for your channel because it'll be all news, but my channel will be destroyed. Every time Trump comes out and starts talking, nobody watches YouTube. Like for me, unless you're a news channel, sure, you might get it because you can come out with the videos talking about what's going on and boom, you get flooded. But for me, every time this guy signs a new executive order, my numbers go down. Every time he gets elected, numbers go down. He's inaugurated. And every time this has happened, the build up to him being up to the election, that people watch more and more politics. And so my numbers start going down. And then as soon as he's elected, and I thought, okay, fine, he's elected, it'll go back up. And it goes up a little bit, but then people start screaming and hollering about what's he going to do, and the numbers go back down. And then he gets the inauguration. I'm like, okay, well, he's in there now. We'll have a few months while he gets kind of acclimated to the environment, right? Like he has to kind of settle in. And no, immediately starts signing executive orders, and the numbers go down. I mean, I miss sleepy Joe Biden, bro.
If you sleep hot at night, you know how disruptive that can be. Whether you're having trouble falling asleep, you're waking up sweating in the middle of the night, or all of the above, that's where GhostBed can help. As the makers of the coolest beds in the world, GhostBed is your go-to for cooling mattresses, cooling pillows, and cooling bedding. From their signature Ghost Ice fabric to patented technology that adjusts to your body's temperature, every Ghost Bed mattress is designed with cooling in mind. So whether you want a plusher mattress that cushions your shoulders and hips, or a firm option with exceptional support, your Ghost Bed will keep you cool and comfortable all night long. When you purchase a Ghost Bed mattress, your comfort is guaranteed. You can try out your mattress for 101 nights, risk-free, to make sure it's the right fit for you. Plus, they offer free shipping, and most items are shipped within 24 hours. If you're not sure which Ghost Bed is right for you, check out their mattress quiz. You'll answer a few questions and get a personalized recommendation. Even better, our listeners can get 50% off site-wide for a limited time. Just visit ghostbed.com/Cox and use the code COX at checkout. Again, that's ghostbed.com/Cox with the code COX at the checkout to save a whopping 50% off site-wide.
I pissed this guy. We never heard from him.
I can't think of a bigger true crime story. If Lyndon B. Johnson or some cabal of CIA mafia were involved, I mean, I would hope that's like pain for your channel.
This video, this is all I got. That's all I got. I'd have to immediately get some JFK guys on here.
I'd start with Jefferson Morley. He's great. And he was actually, interestingly enough, with the Washington Post. So he was like a mainstream media reporter. But
right.
I don't want to speak for him, but my understanding of his exodus was they just didn't want him to cover it anymore. And he I think this is a big story still, the possible assassination. So he just left because the mainstream media that was employing him wouldn't really let him have that as his beat. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, I'm happy to have egg on my face. It's Trump, so most of the stuff that comes out tends to be inflated like a hot air balloon, and then it's not what he says it is. But if it is, I think, yeah.
So, do you want to start with Luigi?
Yeah, whatever you want.
Yeah, let's start with. Do you want to? Would you mind doing a kind of a recap on? I can't imagine anybody doesn't know who he is, but can you? You know what I'm saying? Is there any way you could give a 5-minute recap or 10 or whatever you think it?
Yeah, Luigi Mangione, is your kind of cardboard cutout, affluent kid. He is from one of the wealthiest neighborhoods in Washington, D.C. area. His family is one of the wealthier families in Maryland. And in December, after a 2-week manhunt following the murder of United Healthcare's CEO, he was arrested in Pennsylvania and charged with the murder of Brian Thompson. And since then, it's been kind of this really Robin Hood type explosion of support for him. Definitely from younger people. I definitely see a generational aspect to this. But I've also come across a lot of, boomers and just normie older people that are at the very least saying they support his need for a fair trial, and discussing that they're not exactly in support of him, but also aren't crying tears for the insurance CEO that was killed. So he's really unleashed through his alleged actions. We'll say alleged because he's innocent until proven guilty. He's unleashed kind of really what was lying there out in the open, outrage at what I believe is a predatory, for-profit, fraudulent health insurance system in America. And in all the stories I've covered, and I've been doing particularly investigative on-the-ground journalism for over a decade, I really haven't come across anything that like the left and the right in this just divisive, everybody hates everybody America right now. The left and the right, I've seen it both ways of folks lauding him, supporting him, donating to him, and basically just verbally castigating the insurance industry. So it's really an interesting case because obviously you have the murder, but you also have capitalism really on trial here.
So what is the theory for his motive? I mean, like I've heard of several theories. So I'm wondering, what do you know more about this than I do? What is the main theory? I mean, if he's from a wealthy family, then I'm not understanding. It's not like, is it? I mean, I've heard that, was it his mother or somebody was denied coverage or something like that, or someone someone close to him was denied coverage and he's upset about it. Like, I don't. That's one theory. That's the main theory that I had heard. Is that true?
So there is a lot of theories, but there's enough reporting that is out there that Luigi, as early as like his college age, so he's in his 20s now, but we're talking, late teens, perhaps early 20s, was suffering with this really debilitating back injury. It's known as spondylolisthesis. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but I've had 2 back surgeries, not for that, but I've had back issues, and it can really mess with your mind in addition to the physical pain. So he was dealing with severe spinal issues. There's been reports that he went to several doctors to try to get approval for a spinal fusion, which is where they fuse your vertebrae, but doctors had said he was too young. So I could only speculate if that was what, kind of radicalized him against health insurance companies. But from everything I've researched and, what has gone on, it's not necessarily that his hatred was specifically for the health insurance industry. It seems that he had kind of along the Ted Kaczynski realm of kind of antipathy and hatred towards technology. He had praised Ted Kaczynski's manifesto, not his actions. He said Ted Kaczynski should have been charged and put in prison, but he praised his manifesto, Ted Kaczynski's warnings about how technology was so dangerous and kind of taking over all of our agency. Mangione had used the word, it's removing our agency and our decision-making process. So it seems that through also his alleged notes, again, I say alleged because it hasn't been proven it's his, but police found notes on him that kind of talked about you whack the CEO at the annual parasitic bean counter convention. And he talked about how, insurance checks all the boxes. So it's not clear if it was specifically he had issues with denials and such, which you wouldn't think for him would be such an issue because his family could obviously afford it. Right. It seems that he had just a distaste, borderline hatred of the capitalist system, how technology was being merged with the capitalist system. And he also, in online posts, people found his Goodreads account, which is, books you've read. And a lot of it was about, distaste for capitalism and how technology is, taking over, et cetera. So a lot of it, I'm assuming, will come out in court, but it seems that he chose health insurance specifically, not because he was personally denied, but because health insurance kind of represented all of it, capitalism, technology, and United Healthcare in specific was using artificial intelligence to deny more patients' claims at a 90% error rate. So right. Brian Thompson, who was killed, when he was CEO, he kind of accelerated their deployment of AI, which was basically denying claims almost immediately, and most of the times wrongly denying claims.
Did you ever read the book, The Rainmaker,
Yes.
by John Grisham? Remember the CE, or remember the insurance company's scheme?
Yes.
So that makes me think of that. And by the way, what you just said about him, that is not one of the theories I had heard. I didn't know that. I didn't know he had back problems at all.
Yeah, that's something that kind of came out. That's why it doesn't seem, just from his status in life, super wealthy. I mean, there's plenty of wealthy people who care about, the masses and the downtrodden. But you would think even if he was personally denied, or people he loved were denied, they could pay out of pocket for whatever they needed. So that's why, based on the Reddit posts, because there was a lot of posts from him, alleged, because it hasn't been validated, but enough sources have stated these were his posts. Also, there's a journalist in the UK who spoke with him like 6 months before the murder, who said that he complained about technology, and it came out that he had praised Kaczynski. So it does seem like he had an overall disdain for capitalism, how technology is kind of bleeding into technology. He felt that people were kind of becoming zombies to technology. Why he chose United Healthcare? According to United Healthcare, he didn't have health insurance through them. But he did state in the alleged manifesto, because there is an alleged manifesto, it hasn't been proven it's him or that he wrote it, but he did point out that United Healthcare is the biggest health insurance company. So if he chose health insurance, it makes sense he would target United Healthcare. Yeah,
the Ted Kaczynski thing is super interesting. I mean, I've watched 4 or 5 documentaries on him, but yeah, the Unabomber, his manifesto. Well, his manifesto is really what caught him too. He's living out there in his cabin in the woods, and so I guess it was his father, or no, it's his brother's wife that kind of recognized the manifesto. Then when they printed it, and then his brother looked at it, and she showed it to him and said, "You need to read this." He read it and was like, "Yeah, it definitely sounds like him." And then they found phrases, and then they ended up contacting the FBI. Ultimately, because he was bombing. He was bombing just corporations in general, but I think that he got the Unabomber because of the United Airlines that he bombed. He wasn't just airlines, was it?
Right.
It was other types of large organizations, but I never understood that him just the complete disdain, like without technology, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, I understand he wanted to kind of revert back to just a pre-industrial revolution way of life, but that's not going to happen. Like, you think you're smart enough. The guy didn't he have like a degree from MIT or something? I mean, he was like, he was brilliant. Like, you're a genius, and it's ridiculous. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, dedicate your life to something else if you're trying to be an advocate for something. I mean, that's just, and then you're blowing people up. Like, it's ridiculous.
The interesting thing about Mangione, and this, I believe it's a very dangerous, slippery slope that they've charged him with terrorism, is in his notes, again, alleged notes. I mean, he pointed out that he chose to do it this way. He zeroed in on the investors conference, but he didn't want to actually, do anything big like a bomb or anything like that, because he didn't want to kill innocents. So he deemed the United Healthcare CEO not an innocent, but by default, but he didn't want to do a bombing or anything like that because he didn't want to kill anyone that he deemed innocent. I don't know many terrorists.
No.
Usually terrorists want to kill as many people as possible. So I think that them tacking on terrorism charges in the broader scope, because terrorism charges have been used in other ways in America in the last few years that are very alarming, is very unsettling.
So what's happening with this case right now? What's going on right now with the I mean, they hunted him down, right? They follow all the all the CTV footage of right after the crime. I mean, they got the video from the hotel where he shot the CEO directly in front of the entrance to this hotel, right across the street from this banquet or whatever they were having. Well, I guess not a banquet. What would you call it? Like a convention or whatever. So he shoots him. Did they find the gun?
Yeah.
Okay.
But interestingly enough, that's part of the contention right now. Some might call it, his lawyers just throwing spaghetti at a wall, which lawyers you have to do, particularly if there's a solid case against your client. But his Pennsylvania attorney, so they're kind of taking it from all ends. He's charged in Pennsylvania where he was arrested, but he's also charged in New York, both on the state level. The state of New York is criminally charging him, and a federal case against him. So there's 3 different cases. And the Pennsylvania attorney, where he was originally arrested, has filed 2 pretty significant motions, essentially saying that his arrest was illegal. The way the cops approached him, that they had illegally detained him without reading his Miranda rights, and therefore anything he said and any so-called evidence they seized before reading his Miranda rights couldn't be used. That's what they're claiming. And as they searched his backpack, they didn't have a warrant to search his backpack at the time, and they hadn't read him his Miranda rights yet. They did find a 9mm with a silencer, some 3D printing kind of stuff, because he had 3D printed a gun, and other stuff in his backpack. So I don't know if that's going to work for him in Pennsylvania, but according to his lawyer, if he could prove it, they had essentially held him in what's called a custodial interrogation, which basically means that you're detaining him in a way that there was no way for him to leave, which means you're being detained, and they didn't read him his Miranda rights. So if they're successful there, technically it could have his charges dismissed in Pennsylvania, but that doesn't mean that would have the same effect in New York, because there's 2 different states. You're going by 2 different states' constitutions and laws. But basically, the Pennsylvania case right now, there's motions going on by his attorney, and now the prosecutors have a chance to respond. You would think that the attorney, unless he's just making stuff up, which I doubt he's just making stuff up, there was at least 8 to 10 police at the McDonald's where they arrested. So you have to review body cameras. I don't know if all the police had their body cameras on, because a lot of times they don't. That's where it is in Pennsylvania. Just today, actually, the federal case against him, there was supposed to be a follow-up hearing in 2 days from our discussion now, but that was now punted, delayed for another month. Federally, he's been charged. There's charges against him, but there has not been a grand jury indictment against him yet federally. So I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, but the fact that it's being delayed now another month is suspicious to me. They say that both the prosecution and his lawyers in New York have both agreed to this delay. It makes sense why his lawyers would agree. Mangioni's lawyers would agree. Gives you more time to prepare. According to his lawyers, they have not had all of the discovery provided to them yet. I find it fishy that the prosecution would agree. If they have him dead to rights, if they have all this evidence against him, why hasn't there been a federal indictment yet against him? There's been charges, but a grand jury hasn't returned an indictment. And you would think you want to proceed to trial as soon as you can federally if you have this guy dead to rights. So federally, that case is now delayed. The next court hearing it was supposed to be this week. Now it's moved to mid-April. And the state of New York case, he's had 2 hearings so far. That is expected to be the first one to go to trial, the state of New York versus him. So basically right now it's a holding pattern, and he's got a Pennsylvania attorney and a New York attorney, and presumably they have to work together even unofficially, because if he's successful in New York, if he's successful in Pennsylvania with getting some of the evidence suppressed because they didn't read his Miranda rights, then the New York lawyers are obviously going to try to do the same thing.
If they get that evidence thrown out, Like, I mean, right now he was ID'd by what, a McDonald's employee?
I don't know if it was I think it was a customer who called the police saying that this guy looks like, the wanted sign that was going around.
So if he gets it thrown out, gets that evidence thrown out, I wonder, what do you think what do you think the fallout from that is? I mean, it's not like they're going to drop the charges, right? Like
to me, again, I'm not a lawyer, but as much as I've covered this, to me, I think his best chance of walking is not actually evidence being dismissed or this and that. It's something called jury nullification, which think of like the OJ case.
Nobody just hasn't heard of this.
Right. So OJ, several jurors came out, years later and said, yeah, we thought he did the crime, but whatever. This was payback for Rodney King, talking about the Rodney King riots. So that's basically known as jury nullification, where technically, jurors can think a defendant committed the crime, but for whatever moral or whatever reasons they have, could say innocent. And all it takes is one, So there has been cases where a jury has voted against the judge's instructions and the clear-cut law, and there's been pretty heavy-duty criminal defense attorneys who have gone on national television saying they think this could be a case like that because they have not seen, we're talking lawyers that have been doing this for 20, 30 years, they haven't seen this kind of fanfare for an alleged murderer. And the media has framed it as like, oh, it's all young girls because they think he's good looking. I've covered 3 protests, rallies outside the courthouse as he's in hearings. It's not all young, fangirls. There's a lot of folks out there that are just healthcare advocates, have healthcare horror stories. They might not be outright condoning murder, but they think he should be found innocent. So to me, you got to get 12 jurors all to agree. And I don't know 12 people anywhere that don't have some type of negative experience dealing with health insurance companies. And it seems, we don't know for sure, it does seem that his defense at this point is not going to deny he did it, but kind of put the for-profit health insurance industry on trial. So I think that there is a chance of a mistrial or, some type of jury nullification because, if you've ever watched Law and Order, which we all have seen some type of show like that, a lot of times jury selection is like this big battle. This is going to be, jury selection could go on for 2 weeks because the prosecution is probably going to try to avoid anyone under 40 on that jury. Polls have shown, people have been polled about Luigi Mangione. Polls show particularly college age kids, young people at least have sympathy or empathy towards him. Older generation, not as much. So the prosecutors are probably not going to want young people on there. But even if it's all people in their 40s, I mean, anyone could pretend to be neutral and unbiased, but really have an axe to grind against United Health and others. And that's what has come out. It's not just about Luigi Mangione, but there's been a lot of horror stories out there about how United Health, alleged fraud against elderly people on Medicare Advantage, using AI unethically, not just United Health, others. So I don't know if necessarily his window to freedom would be through suppression of evidence. I think it would just be from you got to get 12 humans to agree.
Right. Yeah. I was just thinking about the jury, and I wonder how much of that type of information on the insurance company the judge will allow the jury to see, because sometimes sometimes the defense will come forward and they'll say, well, here's the theory of our case, here's the path we're going to lay out, and sometimes the judge will be like, yeah, you're not gonna do that, you're not gonna, they'll limit the amount of information or witnesses, and they'll start crafting or shaping the narrative by eliminating what the defense can show the jury. So, but to me, I don't know And first of all, the prosecution's not picking the jury anyway. In the end, they both have strikes. They both, during voir dire, they're going to figure out, hopefully, a decent mix of the jury members, which might be a real problem for the prosecution because, like you said, you only need one or two of these guys, right, to be like, yeah, after listening to all of the horrible things that this insurance company has done to people, I'm not going to convict this guy. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's very possible. Did you see the movie? Sorry, this is the second time I'm mentioning a movie, but and it's not even the movie. I read the book first, so I don't want you to think it's just the movie. Okay. So I read, did you ever read the book, The Runaway Jury by John Grisham?
Was that with Gene Hackman?
The movie was, yes, but in the book, it's about a couple that kind of stalk tobacco cases, right? Where the tobacco company is being sued by people that have gotten, by people who have gotten cancer as a result of smoking since they were whatever. And so they kind of stalk around the country trying to get the one guy, his name's Nicholas Easter, onto the jury so that he can sway the jury his way. Now, in the book, the big bad company is a tobacco company, right? And there's a group of tobacco companies, and they're all working together to try and sway the jury. They hire jury consultants. In the movie, it's a gun company, and it's like the gun lobbyists or the gun companies. They get together and they hire Gene Hackman, who plays a jury consultant, and of course it's super corrupt and it's a whole thing. But here's what's great about it is they show you kind of how they stalk the jury, how they gather evidence, and then how ultimately they try and get dirt on the jury. And now, of course, this is fiction. Okay, this is an extreme example because the main guy that Gene Hackman plays in the movie is called Finch. He's a jury consultant that's extremely corrupt, and he tries to get dirt on as many of these jurors as possible, going so far as to setting up fake like FBI busts where this woman on the jury thinks her husband is was potentially going to be indicted by the government for a real estate fraud. Like they set him up. It's all fake. There's no FBI. It's all played by these private investigators, like a complete setup. But that way they're trying to get her to vote their way. Listen, they've got all kinds of schemes. But it's great because it really shows you the process of the strikes, of how they stalk them. They build kind of case studies on them, how they determine who's going to vote which way as opposed to the other way. It's a great movie. It's a good movie if you haven't read the book. If you read the book, it's not a great movie. The book is phenomenal, but it really lets you know just how dirty these things can get. But yeah, it's the Runaway Jury. So
yeah, and I think also the other component is the New York district attorney, as I said before, slapped on terrorism charges, and I actually think that works against them. Because it's a very unusual use of terrorism. I mean, typically in New York, terrorism, I mean, that's for people who are serial killers or first degree murder too. Serial killers or people who kill cops, not like single targeted murder. But even criminal defense attorneys have said that they feel that's an overreach. So I do think that people feel, and I've interviewed folks who say, they're slapping on terrorism because it was a, health insurance CEO and they want to make an example. So I think that kind of turns potential jurors also against the prosecution because they think, a health insurance executive for an industry people already have disdain against is getting some preferential treatment. I mean, they didn't even charge the guy who killed 9 black people at that church in South Carolina years ago with terrorism.
Right.
So essentially, I think the overcharging here could backfire because if you just kind of charged him with straight, second degree murder, I mean, if they could prove it was him, it's pretty clear cut.
Well, that tends to backfire. The reason, I'm just clarifying. I know you know this, but the reason that backfires is that if you have somebody where you say, hey, like I'm going to say Casey Anthony, because I think, was it the Casey Anthony case where they kind of like they had charged her with first degree murder, and then they also charged her with manslaughter, but then I think they dropped the manslaughter. Something along those lines. It was one of these cases where they I'm not sure it was her case, but where they at the last minute, they felt like they'd made their case and they dropped the manslaughter. And so what they're hoping for is the prosecution's like, we feel like we made our case, or we can make our case that this person's guilty. We're only giving the jury the choice of first degree murder, which means it's premeditated. This person went there specifically with to murder this person, and then they'll drop like manslaughter. And the problem with, I want to say it's Casey Anthony, I could be wrong, but a lot of times what happens is the jury gets in there, and then they say, okay, I think this person is guilty, but we only have first degree murder, and I don't think they're guilty of first degree murder. Right. I would find her guilty of manslaughter because I think that it was a rash decision, or it was a decision that this person made that ended up, and the result of that ended up as someone dying, and that's manslaughter. But we're only being given the one choice of first degree murder. And I don't believe that this person premeditated this murder, which means they got a weapon, they lied in wait for the person, they had plenty of time to change their mind, they traveled for the specific intent. Like, there are all these things that it doesn't apply here. And then they find that person not guilty, and people are like, oh, the jury's horrible. Yeah, but they would have found this person guilty had it been manslaughter, but you took manslaughter off. And so by saying something like, terrorism, well, this guy didn't make a bomb and throw it into a crowd or try and kill 40 indiscriminate people, to show some kind of a political, to put out a political message or anything. This person specifically went, and it's first degree murder, but it's not, I don't see it as terrorism. I see it as first degree murder. You got a gun, you traveled to go there, you waited for this person, you stalked them, you killed them. That's first degree murder all day long.
Right. And again, in his alleged notes, I say alleged because I don't know, it's a quote, what he said about targeting the healthcare exec. It's targeted, precise, and doesn't risk innocence.
Yes,
that doesn't really sound like wanting to, terrorize the community and this and that. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's not indiscriminate enough. So, okay. So, yeah, I guess we'll see.
It'll certainly be, you talk about movies that, based around high-profile trials. I think this is going to be significant. Obviously, right now in America, the media is, on 24/7 Trump watch. But I think if and when this goes to trial, it will definitely be a big case, because it's about many different things, healthcare industry, capitalism. You also have, the New York governor was talking about, after this happening, creating a special hotline for corporate CEOs to call in when they deem a threat. So there's a lot of cascading things here, and people were pissed about that too. Because, hey, can you create a hotline for like average people to call in if they're feeling threatened? Corporate CEOs are going to get their own special hotline. Yeah. So I think this will be a major trial. And, the media, for the most part, has wanted to just focus on Luigi Mangione, very black and white. But I think this fortunately has brought out that unlike most countries that are far less wealthy than us, we have this very convoluted system with 2, 3, 4 different middlemans to get care. And frankly, if you don't have enough money and catastrophe happens, you're kind of SOL. I've covered and interviewed so many people that didn't go to the hospital, didn't get treatment because they couldn't afford it, and that might not kill you right away, but it will eventually. A misdiagnosis or delayed diagnosis, or you didn't get that MRI and later you got the cancer. So I think a lot of people are saying, hey, we're not saying go get your guns and shoot down CEOs, but maybe we should focus on the systematic murder happening every day, which is healthcare being a commodity and you having to have enough money to attain it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it can be extremely frustrating. You know, I mean, just there's all kinds of little things like I actually hired, or actually we got health coverage because our doctors were covered. They were in the package. It was like, oh, perfect. And then like 3 months later, I go to the doctor. I get there, I see the doctor, and they say, you owe $180. And I'm like, no, I'm covered in my health. Oh yeah. No, they're no longer, we're no longer taking them. Okay, well, I specifically got them and got you and did this because like you could have told me before I went and saw the doctor, you know. And so then I change doctors and I get there and I'm being told that I'm completely covered. And you get in there and it's like, oh, well, we're not sure if you're covered or not, even though they were also on the thing. Then I pay. Then I find out I am covered. And out of the $190 that I paid for that, I get a check back for $50. Or I go to get, I mean, this is happening to me all the time. And I have good insurance. I'm constantly like paying and then applying and being told, oh, that was a mistake. And then they mail me back like $50. That's not that's not the 190 I just paid.
Right. And you probably spent like 2-3 hours on the phone and bounced around. Yeah.
My fear is, you know, that, you know, I have cancer and I need actual treatment. And they're like, oh, we'll cover like 70% of it. Well, it's $400,000. I don't have the 30%.
Exactly.
So, and there's really just nothing there's no insurance that's really going to help you that much. They all have these little outs. So real quick, the American flag behind it, what is you got the McDonald's, you have Verizon.
So I wish I created this flag because I would have trademarked it and made a hell of a lot of money. This is the United Corporations of America flag because I've been saying for years we are living in the United Corporations of America. Buy for America, buy for the billionaires. But it's a different company that made it. But it's self-explanatory. You got all the corporations. I'm working on devising my own that will be upside down, which is the distress signal for sailors. Right. But yeah, I mean, I don't care if you're left or right. If you have eyes, you could see our country is based on a system of legalized bribery. Both sides are getting purchased. I mean, Trump, even if you like him, he can't. Mr. Musk gave him almost $300 million, and now Mr. Musk has the keys to the government. So you do the math. So if people think you're still being represented by public servants, I have sad news for you. So that's what that flag's about. But yeah, that's made by another company. And I asked the company, hey, I have all my audience asking me, where do I get that flag? And I'm sending them to you. Maybe you could give me a little cut. I'm not asking for a lot. And they kindly told me to piss off. So, yeah. But if you want, it's just Google corporate flag of America. You'll find it.
Yeah, you got to come up with your own, put it on there, and then just have a link, boom, straight to your Etsy account or something.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Listen, I appreciate it. Unless you have anything else. I mean, we got your book. We didn't even talk about your book.
Yeah. We the Poisoned, exposing the Flint water cover-up. Fingers crossed. I'm in talks to hopefully turn it into a movie. That's another cover-up. Maybe not as big as JFK, but.
Well, they did a documentary, right?
Yeah. Flint Fatigue. You could watch that. FlintFatigue.com. That's another, and you were nice enough to have me on about the book, but that's another example. We have community after community, whether it's water, air, soil. We have mass poisonings going on in America that the media just ignores. A lot of people sick still in Flint from the lead and bacteria, and that's been swept under the rug. So, yeah, my book is We the Poisoned, Exposing the Flint Water Cover-Up, and my YouTube channel is Status Coup, COUP.
Plus, we got like over 200,000. We got over 200,000 views on it.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. Hey, you guys, I appreciate you watching the video. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notified of videos just like this. Also, I'm going to put Jordan's links in the description box to his YouTube channel, his social media, and also his book, which you should see the You should see the video right here. You can click on it and go watch that video. You can go in the description. You can click it and go to Amazon and buy his book or books. Once again, I appreciate you guys watching. Thank you very much. See ya.